Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek in VR news for July 20th. Lots to talk about today, so I'm going to just dive right into it, guys. The first article concerns a company called OSVR. They have created, or they're a manufacturer slash distributor of a virtual reality headset. Their first model was the HDK 1.4. I think there was a prototype before that, but again, it's open source. It suffered from 60 frames per second kind of maximum, so that refresh rate was a little low. It was true 1080p, but not higher like with the Vive and Rift. So they're coming out with their HDK 2. It's going to be $399. You buy it piecemeal, right? So you can do modular purchases. Maybe you only want seated VR, so you just buy the HMD. Well, you're doing it for $400, right? As opposed to buying the whole kit and paying extra for stuff you don't need. Where I want to express caution, though, is because it's no doubt going to appeal to people, right? The price. And if there's people out there and you're kind of on the fence and price is a huge factor, and then you look at the specs and you're like, okay, wow, I can finally get in on this VR thing, you'd be probably pretty disappointed because, and well, let's talk about the pros first. The pros, definitely, it's open source, so the variety of things you can ultimately do on the device is going to be kind of cool, right? You can do things that you just won't be able to do on the other HMDs from the other manufacturers. The problem, there's a negative to that, and it's that damn catch-22 that companies like this always find themselves in, right? They can't create the quality games until they have the market size. They can't get the market size until people buy the damn unit, right? Not everybody can do what Nintendo did in the 80s and Sony PlayStation in the 90s. For a lot of these companies, and what even, popular console manufacturers will pad launch day with a bunch of exclusive titles that they paid for out of their own pocket because they want people to buy their system for the games. There's 14, 15 games being offered for the HDK 2. And quite frankly, they kind of look bad. They look really mini-game-ish. Obviously, it's early. But again, who are you going to attract? The good news in that is you can probably, like I said, there's a variety of stuff. Homebrew, you're going to have that ability. I purchased a GP2X or X2, always get that wrong. It was a handheld from Korea, open source. You could do all kinds of cool emulation on it. You could even play some DOS games with a DOS emulator. But ultimately, it just didn't have a huge market size and died, right? That's my fear with this, that people are going to buy this unit thinking they can get in on all this great VR stuff and then realize after the fact that, oh crap, I can play VR Pong, Tower Defense, or VR Pac-Man. And that kind of sucks, right? But again, if you know that, you go into that, you want it as a hobby, maybe you're a developer, and it's kind of your own development kit, right? Because it's open source, you can try all kinds of stuff that you may not be able to do as a dev with the other units being commercial and not open source, even with an SDK. So that's something to consider. And like I said, the pre-orders start today. Shipments start July 29th. That's $400 US. Now, there are a series of podcasts, VR podcasts on Road to VR that are just awesome. They deal with a huge variety of subjects. And just as an example, the two things they're talking about today in the podcast are 5 different triggers for motion sickness, because some people just don't know what causes their motion sickness. Well, the person who wrote the study, who's being interviewed in the podcast, he knows exactly what type of things cause the motion sickness. So, it can be a little technical at times and a little bit heavy with the jargon, but at the end of it, you're pretty educated in terms of what devs would need to do, what you would need to do if you were making something, and maybe to help mitigate for yourself some of those bad motion effects, right? So that's the one that they have. And the other one is dealing with streaming via a program called VReal, right? Lots of potential there too, and an interesting podcast. So that's on Road to VR. Check it out if you're looking for stuff to read VR based. Now, Mr. Robot is a show that my wife and I watch, and it's about a hacker who's not the most mentally stable guy on the planet, but it's your typical good, awesome cable show. They swear and act like people do in real life and tell interesting stories, right? Well, USA Network, the people whose channel, or the ones who have the channel that the show appears on, are going to join forces with a company called Within and offer a 12-minute Mr. Robot VR experience. And it's done through an app. Description's in the link below. And I believe that's tomorrow. So that's 12 minutes. It's not going to be a huge waste of time if it ends up being bad. But hopefully it becomes a really good 360 experience, as opposed to some of the negative ones and frankly crappy ones that I've been watching the last few weeks. The next article from Upload VR talked about how VR gaming needs to find its heart, right? And obviously that was a whole play on Wizard of Oz and what Wizard of Oz did for special effects films, for the fantasy genre. That is a movie that even as a kid, when it was already 40 plus years old, I watched, and it was filmed in color, shown in color at the time when most movies were black and white. But I remember as a kid just how colorful, clear, and crisp, and those actors looked every bit alive. Some of them were 40 years older and dead by that point, right? Well, with VR gaming, you've got much the same thing. And, you know, we've had the discussion before between us about killer apps. And that is exactly what I get out of that article from what the author is saying, is that we still need that killer app. And boy, we're going to take notice when it comes, because what it's going to do, we don't know yet, but what I can guess it's going to do is relay the virtual reality experience in just some awesome, innovative, and original way. Maybe with a twist here and there. And that is ultimately going to classify it as a killer app, right? When is that going to get released? Will it ever? Well, we don't know, right? But the nice thing about that is as devs move forward and they see these other experiences out there, some shut themselves off completely. They don't want to be tainted and exposed to other stuff to keep their own creativity. Others have no problem borrowing, mixing genres. And that is going to be another strength of VR. It is already, is transcending those genres and those boundaries that we've gotten so used to the last 30, 40 decades of gaming. So definitely agree. Really cool article to kind of really get you thinking about what it's going to take for that killer app and what it could do for VR. Then there's an article about Sony. And it's also on Upload VR. And what it does is it talks about the PlayStation VR's theater mode. And some details on that. So there's 3 theater modes. The default is medium, and that gives you a screen that basically fills your field of view. Large, scaled-wise, how it's going to feel to you, they say, is like a 226-inch screen. Obviously scaled, right? But that would be a theater screen kind of on the small side, because they generally start at about 30 feet, and this would be 20-something, right? But you get the idea. The small setting has a feature, even though it's got a smaller area to view the movie, it follows your gaze. So you can even lay down and watch on your VR quite easily and have those types of angles. So I thought that was neat. Can't wait to just try new stuff, right? Obviously, you guys know I like my toys, but that's what's going to drive me and want me and push me to get the Sony PlayStation VR, because it's just going to help the Vive and Rift development scene. People are going to borrow off each other. and hopefully push it forward. Yet another Upload VR article had 5 GIFs that show why we can't wait to play Media Molecule's Dream on the PlayStation VR. Biased article. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias kind of in everything, right? But if you have a read of it, you know, they talk about the scale. They talk about all those things that I just touched on with the killer app theory, right? It's a little bit puzzle, and I think they compared it to Tilt Brush, right? And the Oculus launch one, Medium. But I don't think that's an accurate comparison. I kind of put it into the kind of the puzzle genre, platformer, with a cool twist in that, kind of like that Mario Maker where you can make levels, you're going to be able to create user content. And one of the screenshots they showed was, you know, kind of a network view where you could see all the uploaded user content, obviously staged for the video, but in reality, that could come to pass where you've literally got hundreds of hours of gameplay experience. There's building aspects to it. You can run through it after with a character, so you get that platformer style. So all in all, that's a promising title. I can't wait to see that and hopefully have it launch around the same time with the PlayStation VR. And then the last thing I want to talk about is our good friends Nvidia, and haven't seen a lot of from AMD on VR. Nvidia really seems to be putting a step forward. Now, other than the RX 480, right? But knowing AMD, they probably got a few tricks up their sleeve that we'll see later in this year. But what Nvidia is doing is they're embracing the whole SMI eye tracking. And the idea behind the eye tracking is very similar to what I showed in yesterday's video dealing with raw data, in that when you're looking at the center of the screen in raw data with that one graphical setting where pixels displayed near the perimeter of the screen are lower resolution. And I think I commented in the game at the time that I couldn't tell the difference. I really couldn't, right? This is going to take that and kind of one-up it on juice, steroids, if you will, right? It's going to do that same concept wherever you move your eyes. So if you move your eyes towards the top, it's going to do the pixels closest to the perimeter in focus and lower res down below. You've now got that whole screen ability to do that. So ultimately, will it net itself out in terms of performance gain? I don't know, but that's just a nice side effect of eye tracking. Never mind the eye tracking itself, which is going to have all kinds of, you know, pros to it. A few cons, but a lot of pros as well. So another thing to keep our eyes on, literally, excuse the pun, is that. And that technology to render is just, it's going to go hand in hand. Just kind of as the last thing to wrap this up. When we think about advancements, they come in different areas, right? We're not just getting them in one area. Granted, GPUs have year over year, they get more powerful, and we kind of expect the same from CPUs. CPUs haven't been as important a part of the equation. Of course, they're important in the fact that you can't power the damn thing without it. I mean, in terms of contributing to that game speed, right? They do, but by and large, it's a GPU game now, right? So little things like the eye tracking, little innovations like that, they're all going to work towards boosting performance, realism, which may come at the cost of additional performance, but all of it's moving us forward into some pretty damn cool stuff. Holodeck, here we come. It's going to happen. 10 years, 15 years, like I commented before, the young guy inside me watching Wesley Crusher, I was thinking it was going to be by 1998, 1999. That didn't come to pass. 2016, but we're getting there. All right, guys. As always, cheers. Have an awesome one.